I thought this would be an interesting one because satire is something we often hear about these days. We often hear that X or Y is satire. We hear that this is supposed to be making fun of you. But most of the time, you then look at the product, the media product that you're supposed to be insulted by, and you go, well, if it is trying to insult me, it's not doing a particularly good job of it. This
I hope
doesn't
this
seem.
is satire, by the way, because obviously the 1980s was peak cinema.
Well, this was Dan asking a question, and I thought as soon as we got you on here, Nate, that it would be an important question to ask you as well, or an interesting one. Because in this segment from I think it was last week, he was talking about how, AI is going to be taking over making some films when the technology gets better and better and better. Probably be a lot of work still actually programming in all of the commands and writing a script that it'll be able to understand. But you will be able to get to the point at sometime in the future where you will just be able to enter in a load of commands and have a product after an hour or two that you can then edit into something that's usable. But at the beginning of this, he asked the question, when do you think the last really good year for movies was? Where you could say the blockbuster releases that were good outweighed the ones that were bad. And I'd interested to get an answer from both of you here.
I don't know, because in cinema you think of the era as opposed to the year itself, generally speaking. So you said the 80s,
Yeah.
didn't you? And the 80s, like synonymous with fantastic cinema as a whole. Individual years, not something I would ever really boil it down to. I would always look at an era because that tends to, you've got the sort of fashionable elements of the entire era, sort of, all within one.
Dan put his down to 2008, mainly because Tropic Thunder came out.
Specific, right?
It's really specific.
Mainly because Tropic Thunder came out and he finds Robert Downey Jr. in blackface really funny. And to be fair, I respect that. So if you can't think of a particular year, then what would you guys say is the last really good era of movies where it's really consistent classics coming in?
I would say the 80s, the end of the 70s, and as it sort of went into the 80s. Was fantastic cinema. It was really, really good. There's so many cult classics to this day, and films which, you talk about AI as well. Like, you're never necessarily going to get the issues that were on set which generated such great cult classic films, and that's part of AI's sort of awful hygienic element, which will just ruin art moving forward.
Yeah, you can't have the same improvisational element into the film when you're having to really refine everything to a prompt that an AI can understand. Like I recently had a discussion with Chloe from Proper Horror Show, which will be appearing on the website very soon, where we were talking about the works of Stanley Kubrick. We only got a bit of the way through because his works are so interesting to talk about. There's so much to talk about. I was really shocked to discover that for a guy with a reputation as being so meticulous and so precise with everything that he did, that he was actually really improvisational on the sets as well, and was sometimes, especially on the set of something like The Shining, would be giving new script pages to the actors every single day. Where to the point where Jack Nicholson said, I don't read the scripts anymore. I wait for them to show up and I read the lines because I don't know if I memorize them one day, they're going to change the next day, which really shocked me. But that really adds to the tension of a film like The Shining. The fact that Stanley Kubrick was basically abusive to the actors on that set really got the best performances out of them.
Yeah, well, exactly.
Is he famous for doing a stupid number of takes?
Oh, yes.
Over 100 takes of the scene where the axe is coming through the door and Shelley Duvall is screaming.
Completely unnecessary.
Yeah, he basically traumatized
I'm a filmmaker and he's one of the best of all time. So.
Say unnecessary, but then does the product speak for itself?
Right, yeah, no, fair
That's
point.
the thing,
It's the exact opposite of someone like Clint Eastwood, for instance, because obviously he's directed dozens and dozens of films. He does one take every time, and then he says, "No, put it. That's it. We're done." So if you've nailed it that first take, amazing. But there's so many stories of actors doing that first take with Eastwood on the first day when they're filming with him and going, "Oh, I feel like I could do this better. Should we go again?" And he's like, "Nope, we're doing the next shot." Oh, all right, then.
Your question of when was peak cinema, I'm painfully aware that my answer might just be when I was still a kid or a teenager. But I feel like, the 80s into the 90s, I think like by the mid-90s, something like Jurassic Park or Terminator 2 or something, still in sort of the mid-90s sort of time, they weren't infected with woke nonsense. So I think there's loads of great films from the 90s. Even in the early 2000s, there were still great films getting made.
Well, But it started to bleed into the over-reliance on technology as well. So they would CGI stuff that very clearly did not need CGIing, or the limitations of CG did not allow it in the first place. And so that started to bleed into it, and then just
I would probably
ruined it from there, I think.
I would probably, for me, it's difficult. It's so difficult because there's so many films that I like over such a wide period of time. But I suppose I would say, that early 90s to early 2000s period for me, because by the time you get to the early 2000s, you've had really great films like The Matrix come out. And then you've had the Lord of the Rings trilogy come out at that time period as well. And then since then, there's still been plenty of good films that have come out since then, but there's definitely been a shift.
Oh, yeah.
There's been a shift in the quality, a shift in the type of production. As soon as green screens became this really affordable and quick, easy way to make a film, that's where you get stories of like Sir Ian McKellen on the set of The Hobbit, where he'd been in The Lord of the Rings before and really enjoyed the experience, where he's on The Hobbit and all of his scenes are now in front of a green screen, and he actually begins weeping on set because he says, I didn't start acting so that I could yell at a tennis ball in front of a green screen. That's not what I started doing this for. Because that experience is just so unnatural for anybody to act in a realistic way. And, as much as we all joke and say, the prequels are better than people give them credit for, and in some ways they are, but they definitely helped start that.
Yeah.
It depends what, obviously, what you define as a good film. I mean, we talk, say, the 80s was great for films, but then if you take one of the most quintessentially 80s films off the top of my head, I think maybe like Commando or something, it's a good Arnie action film, but in terms of greatest films of all times, nowhere near really. It's pretty silly film.
There are some really great Arnie 80s films that can fall into that category.
I think I like Commando. I love Commando. But
First Terminator, I'd say, is a classic
film. That's a
low budget thriller. Among those, it's one of the best. Predator.
Yeah, Predator's
That's
brilliant.
an absolute classic.
I love Predator. I like Commando. I'm just saying, if you're going to make your top 20 films of all time, Commando's not going to make the cut, right?
But
that's what I'm saying.
You raise a really interesting point, and I think it's really valid, actually, is that era balanced it nicely. And that's what's lacking in today. There is no balance. It's one singular focus, one singular message, subversive nonsense from Hollywood. And that's it. That's actually what we have as a range of films to enjoy. Clearly, there are obviously some things which slip through the cracks, of course. But generalization, it's all homogenous. It's a homogenous story, homogenous casting, diversity through casting, not diversity through storytelling. So you saying that Commando was there and it's a bit silly and stuff, yeah. But we had good balance.
It's fun though.
Exactly.
And we had really good films these days.
We had really good balance and good counter programming. And the art of counter programming is lost now. Generally.
Real life squibs, no CGI. It's all real squibs.
RoboCop was amazing for the squibs back in the day.
Yeah.
What is it? The E something or other machine, the
Ed
robot.
209,
Ed 209 when he just unloads on that guy in the boardroom. That's an amazing scene.
Yeah, I watched that when I was too young. I think I was about 9 years old, and that scarred me. That was the first super gruesome killing I ever saw on celluloid. Anyway,
and then he said, "Awesome,
yeah,
super cool, yeah, do it again."
I think it's also this thing about how to say it, that there's a humanity to older films from the 80s, from the 70s, from the 60s, or even old black and white films. There's a real humanity to them. I hope people know what I mean by that.
I think,
and now films where you've got a Mary Sue or something, where it's just DEI, just crammed down your throat. It's not the real human experience. Nothing is explored about the human experience in them.
I think there's something to be said for the difference between then and now, filming on 35mm or different types of film, as opposed to digital, which is what most people do now. Because with film, you get the film grain, there's a certain naturalistic look to film. Even though it looks very cinematic, it feels like it's happening in front of you and can drag you in. Whereas digital, as high definition as it can get, you get that artificial, unnatural look to it. There's a bit of a sheen on everything that I don't like as much.
They actually try to bring back in the older look in post, so a lot of it's noise. They try to add noise back to the digital.
Tell the difference.
Try to add grain, yeah, absolutely. But it's even down to motion blur. So old film, it's shot on like 23.9 frames a second, and it adds a really nice motion blur, and it's what we're trained, and it's what the human eye appreciates. We like it. but now a lot of it's shot on a much higher frame rate or sort of downgraded and things like that.
Yeah, that was the
And The
problem with
Hobbit,
as well.
Yeah, 60 frames a second. It's awful. It's horrendous to look at.
I heard stories of
Hurts.
people.
Like, it actually hurts your eyes.
I mean, they
Makes you feel sick.
I think they could only show it in that frame rate in certain specialized cinemas that were prepared for it. And people who went to go see it there, they reported lots of headaches.
Yeah, it makes you feel really nauseous.
Because I remember one time I was at my sister's, and her mister at the time was watching Harry Potter or something on the TV, and it was a really high frame rate TV. It was like, 4K is in 60 frames per second these days. And it was a precursor to that.
Ugh.
And I looked at it, and it was so strange to me because everybody looked like they were moving in fast motion,
Yeah,
but too slow at the same time. It felt really unnatural to my eyes. So strange.
You know what I'd like to see? I'd like to see a film shot nowadays with an actual old school, really old school, like 1960s Technicolor film. What is it, 35 millimeter film or something?
Yeah.
You know, like how Cleopatra or Ben-Hur or one of these old 60s, sort of the early color films. Yeah, not a digital version to make it look like that, but actually do it.
Yeah.
Get people that, I'm sure those cameras still exist, even if they're museum pieces. Do a film in that again. I'd love to see that.
Yeah, you can still get that old school aesthetic. You just need to use the old school technology. I think, did The Lighthouse, I know The Lighthouse was filmed in a very specific old school aspect ratio. Do you know if that was shot on film or was that digital?
The ins and outs of that, I can't quite remember now. I think there was something to do with that, whether it was shot on film or not. I'm not quite sure, but I know that they went through quite a lot of issues making that. So it might have been that they were shooting it on film. I don't know.
Because I can completely understand from a practical mindset why you would choose to shoot on digital. It's so much more convenient. You don't have to lug around as much technology. You don't have to, the editing process, you're not having to actually go through film reels and splicing them together that way. But it just looks better. For me, it looks a lot better. But going on to what we talk about with classic 80s and 90s films, one of the big bits of discourse that happened recently was... the thing seems to have stopped working. One moment. Was the Starship Troopers discourse. And there was the big idea that there was a certain type of person on the left who had decided that because Paul Verhoeven had decided not to read the book that it was based on, or at least not read past like page 50, and went, people love their country and are willing to fight for it, this must be fascism. And then said that his film was a fascist satire. Then lots of leftists watched the film and say, well, no point thinking for myself. It must be a fascist satire, and that was a big interesting thing because they like to trot out this new term that's only really started popping up in the past year or so, which was the media literacy. If you disagree with my take on a particular film or piece of media, you need to get some media literacy, which means read an interview with the author so that he can tell you what to think, or as I saw someone point out, which is much more likely in what they're doing, watch a video essay from a leftist who read some interviews so he can tell you what to think by proxy, which is interesting. And the same thing seems to be happening with this new game that I've only just heard of.
But whatever you do, don't read the original Henline novel.
No.
Whatever you do, don't do that. Okay.
No, because you're not a fascist, are you, Bo? You wouldn't read fascist literature, would you, Bo? That would be verboten.
Fascist sci-fi.
Yeah, comrade. There's this new game that came out recently, which I've only just heard of. Carl and some other members of the office have been telling me that it's really awesome to play. And I saw that you've spoken about it recently as well, which is Helldivers 2, which is very clearly to me, we couldn't afford the Starship Troopers license, so we just made a Starship Troopers game, but called it something else instead.
Sorry to interrupt the video, but I just want to let you know that we have a brand new selection of merch on our merch store. These won't be in store forever, so if you do want them, go and get them now. Thanks very much.
Where a lot of people are very annoyed that people like it, despite the fact that, don't you realize this is a heckin' satire of fascism, bro? This is the opening cinematic, which I watched earlier, which is actually pretty funny. So...
Super Earth, our home. Prosperity. Liberty. Hi there. Democracy. Our way of life. Oh, hello. But freedom doesn't come free. No! Sweet liberty! No! Look familiar? Scenes like these are happening all over the galaxy right now. You could be next. That is, unless you make the most important decision of your life. Prove to yourself that you have the strength and the courage to be free. Join the Helldivers. Become part of an elite peacekeeping force. See exotic new life forms. And spread managed democracy throughout the galaxy. Become a hero. Become a legend. Become a Helldiver.
I mean, sign me up.
Yeah,
That looks great. That looks fun. And from what I've been told in the office, it sounds like a really fun game. But people are sharing stuff like this. Friendly reminder, you should not, this is from the Helldivers alerts, your true value should be placed in something greater. Kindness and morality. Don't be cringe, choose to think. Okay, so from what I saw there, one, I've got a question. Do you think the guy in that was supposed to look as much like Richard Spencer as he did? With the hair and everything? Two, if this is supposed to be some kind of satire of fascism, which is what some on the left on Twitter seems to think it is, once again, we have a problem, a similar problem that shows up in Starship Troopers, which is fascist, multiracial, multi-ethnic family. Which is not what I remember Mussolini and Hitler advocating for. But, you know...
Not classic fascists.
Yeah, I can't really remember that part of it. But okay, you know, you see some people say, well, of course, the most ethnically diverse people on the internet are the racists. So maybe that's something to do with it. But also, once again, it's really difficult to get me to sympathize and empathize if there is really a legitimate threat from massive demonic alien bugs that want to rip my face off. You're not going to get me having much sympathy for them. I've also been told that the other enemies of the game is the like Terminator killer robot.
Yeah. The left don't know how to have fun.
Yeah, it just looks
They just
fun.
don't have fun, do they?
And
Let's
also-
be honest.
And also, they literally use the term managed democracy in here. So if anything, the most this could be said to be making fun of is America spreading trans rights across the world. But even then, if you're looking at this and going, well, those bugs are obviously supposed to be Middle Eastern Muslims.
Oh,
Well,
that's a self-report on the individuals, isn't it?
it's funny.
It's the classic
the
thing, though. Defending yourself in any way is fascist.
Mhm.
Right? That's sort of the overriding thing they're saying there. I noticed 9 million views.
I think that's because
so incredibly popular.
a lot
Broken records.
of people are not are making fun of this.
Okay. Well, that's
Um,
good. That's something.
But also, it seems to be a very popular game at the moment, and other people are pointing out, you know, this classic meme. Whoa, a satire on how heckin' bad fascism is? No, the real message, shut up, nerd. And remember, if you're having fun in a game, you're having fun with the mid-century mustache man. Do your part to stop fun and fascism by joining your local media literacy commune today.
Oh, is it an Xbox game? I assumed it was a PC game.
I think it's PC game, but I don't know if you can do you know?
I think you can play it on.
Yeah, you can
on
get it.
Xbox as well.
Shockingly, I don't know if this is a real image. I think there might be some editing trickery going on here. But I was pointed to this by Carl, who shared with me that the actual makers of the game are maybe not in on this whole satire joke thing going on as well, because there's these screenshots from the Steam page where people are leaving reviews saying, friend got banned for asking to add one LGBTQ cape. My friend got permabanned from the Discord without a warning when all bro did was ask if there's a chance they will add LGBT cape or background. Dude was permabanned and even got death threat in his DMs. Okay. I get it that a lot of people that play this game are COD fanboys from Shroud and Summoning's One fan base, but dude, it is pathetic how toxic this community. Wokehammer L's saying that I will now buy your game. I'm shocked that if this is true, if this is real, then that's shocking amount of
Based.
deviance from the prescribed narrative from the developers of this game, if it's the developers Discord that this person got kicked from. Because most companies would go like, oh, don't worry, we've already got the gay stuff planned.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the thing with a lot of these is that, so there was, I think it was, I can't remember what game it was, might have even been, I don't know, another online service game that you could sort of mod, and people were making mods to remove a bunch of the political messaging, and they clamped down on it. It was like, no. We're going to ban you if you mod this stuff and remove it. And it's like, well, this is the alternative of that, which, if this is true, great, good.
Do you want to have fun with our games? Well, great. We won't shove anything down your throat. You can have fun with our game where you shoot big, evil bug monsters in outer space.
It's also weird, doesn't really make that much sense to me, is that, I want to play the game where we export, quote unquote, democracy across the galaxy at the point of a machine gun, killing massive bugs. I'm up for all of that, but only if I can have a rainbow skin on my futuristic machine gun. Only then will I be comfortable. It's just
how many genders
nonsense.
exactly are we exporting to these alien planets? And there was other reports as well where some people were just saying like, no politics in the game. I was banned from the Discord, blah, blah, blah. Can the whole democracy bravado be toned down? But I dislike the nationalistic fascist theme that it has. I thought it was supposed to be a joke, bro.
Don't play the game.
You obviously don't have the media literacy to be able to understand and comprehend what's going on here. But from what you were saying, we know what happens to a lot of games that, I think Go Woke, Go Broke is got a bit of a 50-50 hit rate.
Yeah.
But when it does hit, it hits hard, and you get lots of games these days that do really pander. As I spoke about recently with you and Callum, Bo, the Suicide Squad game, which came out and was very unpopular, decided to crap all over the franchise that it was part of, disregard the legacy characters, can literally piss on their corpses at points where one of the characters urinates on the Flash after you kill him, because that's what you want to do when you're playing a fun superhero game, right? It's murder the heroes and then urinate on their corpses. Well, it turns out that doesn't really do very well. Turns out that people look at that and say, this looks, one, the game doesn't look fun. Two, this is really insulting and hates me. So I'm not going to pay. I'm not going to pay for it. And Warner Brothers Discovery have said that it's fallen short of our expectations, which is it's basically corporate talk for has tanked.
Well, they go on to say how the rest of the year is going to be really, really tough, and they're not going to recover. But ultimately, you get what you deserve at this point. You employed Sweet Baby Inc. You only employ them if you don't want money. That's what they're there for.
That I found looking into it was, I think it was the CEO of Sweet Baby Inc. was one of the head writers on it. They stuck Sefton Hill and some of the other old Rocksteady guys' names on it, who had left the company halfway through production of this game, so that you would think that, it's the same creative team, but really they'd airdropped in a load of professional wokesters to write it for.
The thing about games now, this is a AAA game, supposedly a AAA game as well. I mean, people's cynicism with these games are so sky high, and the games developers should know this, right? Because you release a game, day one patch, the equivalent size of the game, like you're selling a broken product, and yet they still have the audacity to release this garbage, knowing full well the cynicism within the market. I mean, it's just sheer resentment and hubris.
I think there's a part of them that want it to fail so it can generate headlines saying misogynistic gamers refuse to buy a game because they hate women. I think that when you talk about the cynicism, that might be fueling part of it.
The other thing is, I haven't played this game or the other one we were just talking about, but from what I understand, from what Carl said, the actual game, regardless of any of the storyline or anything, the actual gameplay, in-game gameplay, is fun and good. And for that one, apparently it's not.
No, so
apparently this is like an actual crap game.
This is going to give you an epileptic seizure if you play it, because the amount of crap that it throws on screen at all times. I watched the supercut of Mauler playing through it, and the amount of crap on screen on the UI means you can't even see what you're doing half the time, which is not a fun recipe for a game, shockingly enough.
It's the same with movies. You could make a left-leaning wokist movie. I don't think one has been made yet, but it would be possible to make one that was well written and well put together enough that as a piece was a good movie. I think that would be possible. Okay. Same thing goes for something that's super based or right leaning. If it's put together poorly enough, it won't be a good movie. And so obviously the same would apply to games. Like, is the actual game fun? Are we even? Does people even really ask that much anymore?
So-
But anyway, according to Cole, that Starship Troopers game is a good game.
Yeah, there you go. I did have some more stuff, but it's not as relevant, and I think it can be saved for another time. So,
If you appreciated that episode from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content on the site, such as Broken Obic series, which this episode is looking at your mum. If you'd like to find out what else is being put out, you can follow on Twitter at lotuseaters_com on Twitter. Thank you and goodbye.